All right, welcome to another edition of the Seth and Gentry Show. You might notice that we're in a little different setup today. That's because one of us is in excruciating back pain. I'm not going to say who, except I just really hope these meds kick in pretty quickly. Thank you to Dr. DeWitt for the prescription. Gentry will start off with the Ole Miss game. When that game was 10-0 early on before Marlon Brown gets downfield, were you thinking that there's a realistic chance of Georgia losing this game, or did you think it was kind of a matter of time before Georgia turned the switch?
Well, I thought it was early, but Georgia needed to wake up. They didn't need to go down 17-0 or 24-0 or let it get any worse than it was. But I think the touchdown to Marlon Brown, the play action play, that was well timed.
Yeah,
that was well called, well executed, and came at a good time for Georgia. And I felt like after that point the defense settled in, started playing a lot better, and that's really what turned the game. I think Georgia's offense did its thing early in the third quarter and built a little cushion, but the defense held Ole Miss to very little in the
second half. That was the big question, was whether the defense would have a second straight good game. In my mind, they basically did with some problems early on, but the defense, that was something that, once again, they showed they did build on the Florida game.
Yeah, and just very physical against the run. They held Florida to 80-something yards. They held Ole Miss to 40-something yards. That's pretty strong for 2 weeks in a row for a team that had been giving up more than 200 a game to South Carolina and Kentucky. That's a significant leap. Georgia was very physical, and they disrupted what Ole Miss wanted to do. Ole Miss was not able to run directly at Georgia for pretty much the whole game, and I feel like Georgia's just playing a little more physical. They were able to keep that up.
Is this a case of, once again, Georgia kind of playing the bully, beating up on a team that they should beat up on, or do you take away from this some very encouraging signs, a continuation of the Florida game?
I don't know. I mean, I think Ole Miss is a pretty good team,
yeah.
And for Georgia to dominate them in the final two quarters,
because they didn't dominate Kentucky.
No,
they didn't dominate Tennessee.
No, and I do think it is progress that they were able to slam the door shut, and they weren't able to do that in some other games. But you take it for what it's worth. It's Ole Miss. I think Georgia was able to out-talent them and overwhelm them in a lot of ways. Although Ole Miss is not a bad team. They're a well-coached team. Going back and watching that game, they do a lot of good things, and I've been impressed with Hugh Freeze. I think he's going to do a good job there.
The mantra going forward for me is that if Georgia played Alabama this Saturday, I wouldn't give Georgia too much of a chance. But they're not playing Alabama next. They had that Ole Miss game. Now they got Auburn, then Georgia Southern, Georgia Tech. Get through those unscathed, especially get through the Auburn game, and you've got a chance at least at the SEC championship. You have an opportunity over the next 3 weeks to iron out some things and put yourself in a position where you're in a better position as a team to compete with Florida or with Alabama. In my mind, I don't know. Well, let me ask you first. Is it too late in the season to make these kind of improvements? Is it too late in the season to suddenly fix everything that's going on in special teams, to firm up the defense, to have the O-line be consistent? Or can Georgia use these next 3 weeks to get a little bit closer to being on the same field with Alabama?
Well, obviously I think they can, but for what you just mentioned, I think the defense has gotten better. I think the special teams is what it is, but it's getting better. And the question to me is the offensive line. We're going to have a lot of time to talk about that Alabama game, and that's still a ways off. Georgia still needs to win another game, and Alabama still needs to win another game, too, for that to happen. But it does look like that's probably what's going to be the case, and I think that the offensive line...
Fashion update. Sorry to interrupt you. Mark Richt walking to practice right now. Red sweatshirt. Mark Richt looks like Bill Belichick. Breaking news.
He does. Got the hoodie.
He's got the hoodie. Red hoodie, gray sweatpants.
And a smile. He's a happy guy.
Yeah, he's a happy guy. I'm not sure. Hopefully, Mark Richt will not be acting like Bill Belichick when it comes to media relations.
But I think as you look at the Alabama game, I think Georgia's offensive line is going to be the thing, and that needs to get better.
What do you do on that line, Gentry? I mean, Canarius Gates, to me, God love him, I think he's a better guard than a left tackle, and I'm not sure they have the left tackle, the guy that can be that lockdown blindside guy on this team. Maybe John Theus is next year, but you've been working him at right tackle the whole time, and even he has some problems every now and then.
I think the lockdown left tackle might be playing high school ball in Lake City, Florida right now. But
Laramie Tunsil, we're allowed to comment on him. Mark Richt, he can't.
But I think that if Burnett is out, and we don't know his status for this week yet, but if he's out with the shoulder injury, then you're going to see Gates at guard because he'll have to go to right guard, and they're going to have to play Mark Beard in there. And here's the thing, and I noted this in the film study that I did on Dogs 24/7, is that it's not one guy. It's different guys on different plays. Mm-hmm. And if it was one guy, or if it was one area or one thing they just weren't doing well, it would be an easy fix. But it comes and goes. I mean, they just have breakdowns here and there. And, Ole Miss was good.
And there were some plays where it was the backfield pass protection, too.
Sure.
Where Todd Gurley didn't pick up.
I think Keith Marshall has distinguished himself ahead of Todd Gurley in that area. I think Keith Marshall's done a good job pass pro lately. But right now, the offensive line, they're maybe a little better run blocking, but they're not dominant there. And the pass protection, Ole Miss was a team that came in with a lot of sacks. They were fourth in the SEC in that, so that was a little bit of a red flag going into that game. And sure enough, they get a few early. The positive out of that is I think Aaron Murray, despite the whole
well, yeah, and Bobo said this. They went to in the second half, or even late in the first half, back to what has worked for them this year in terms of overcoming the problems on the line. The quicker throws, the spreading it out.
Well, and Murray, the stigma he has is that if you pressure him, you can rattle him, and that didn't happen in that game. They pressured him early, and Murray really did step up and play a very good game all the way through. And I think that's a good sign because these teams they played. I think it'll be interesting to see what Auburn does to Georgia because Auburn's defensive coordinator obviously knows this offense and these coaches so well that he'll have a good plan. Now, can his players execute it? Can Auburn? Is Auburn really going to care enough to put forth the effort?
10 points. That's a question. We haven't talked about Marlon Brown yet. Obviously, he's out for the year. I think if it were just Marlon Brown at this point, it would be kind of mitigating. But you put that on top of Michael Bennett, and now Aaron Murray's losing some weapons. Now that ability to spread it out and go 4 and 5 wide is really tough because I think you've probably got 4 solid guys, but the fifth spot is getting tough.
I think it hurts them in blocking. I think Brown was one of their better blockers. I think Bennett was too.
Bennett was their best receiver blocker.
And that hurts you when some of these runs, these 70, 80-yard touchdown runs where the receivers were beating guys downfield. You don't see that as much anymore. Yeah. I think without Brown, that's going to be more difficult. But if there's one receiver out of that group that I think they couldn't afford to lose to injury, it's Malcolm Mitchell. I think he is the one that can take the cap off the defense. He's the big play guy.
And he's a guy that should still be on a little bit of an upward trajectory because of the arrested development for him of not playing offense the first 4 weeks.
I can't imagine him doing anything on defense now. I mean, they're going to need him. And
you still got Tavares King back there.
Well,
he's reliable.
What do you think about Justin Scott Wesley? Why do you? Because this is a question I have on why he hasn't played much this year, and that's honestly surprised me. I really did think he was going to make an impact.
I'm sure that there's, and I'm going to talk to him after practice today. I think you might too. We'll have stories on him later, but I'm sure that's a good question for the coaches. But I'm sure that they've seen something in practice that said he's not quite ready. They're ready to go for Rhett McGowan or even Taylor Bradbury more than they are. But that's been a hallmark. We could go on for a while about this, but that's been a hallmark of this coaching staff. They, on both sides of the ball, will go for the guy that is more proven, more reliable. They will send Rhett McGowan back to fair catch punts before they will let Malcolm Mitchell take chances. That's last year on defense when you had Jeremy Sulik, God love him, and this year with Connor Norman playing safety over Corey Moore or Josh Harvey Clemens. That's something the staff does, but they may be forced now that Justin Scott Wesley has to play.
Well, and Scott Wesley out of Big Camilla, Georgia, Mitchell Baker High School. You remember that?
Oh, I don't know that I covered him, but I covered some Mitchell Baker, Randolph Clay basketball games.
Heck of a basketball program down there, I'd say.
You can tell that Georgia's not playing a great team because we could spend 2 minutes on South Georgia basketball, but I have never covered better high school.
Albany Herald.
Yeah, I have not covered better high school basketball than in South Georgia. All right, Gentry, let's do the Auburn game before we lose our entire audience except everyone in Albany. Do you give Georgia much of a chance to get upset here? Or I mean, it's a night game, it's a rivalry game, but I just keep coming back to Auburn has no offense, and Georgia's defense is playing better.
This is one of those games where you look at Auburn and you just say, I don't see how they can do it. Mm-hmm. I just see no way from what Auburn has shown this year. But you know what? I would have said the same thing about Kentucky. And that game was an absolute dogfight because Georgia wasn't ready to play it. And I think if Georgia is not ready and they go into an atmosphere, I think Auburn will put everything into this game. It'll be a good atmosphere. It always is down there. And I think Auburn has athletes. They have a lot of kids from Georgia. They're going to be up for this.
Yeah.
This is going to be their season to try to spoil things for Georgia. Georgia better be ready. I think it's going to be a
There
tougher
was
game
a
than people
quote from
think.
an Auburn player, Corey Lemon. I already forgotten it, but last night talking about how they would be able to ruin Georgia's season, and that's a motivation. It might be kind of corny, but for Georgia, that's a quote you got to put up on the bulletin board to get
Well, and if you're
make guys
Auburn-
realize that they're going to get Auburn's best shot. Now their best shot may not be that great, but they're going to get it.
Well, and Auburn needs something. I mean, that was a team that against Texas A&M quit. Went out there in the first, it just never showed up in that game. Got absolutely their doors blown off. That's not going to happen this time. I think Auburn is going to play pretty well. They've got coaches that know this team. That's really, really going to help their defensive preparation, and it'll be an interesting game. But again, you just look at the two teams involved, and I don't see how, unless Georgia just hands the game, gives the game away.
Which is not beyond the realm of possibility, but ultimately I come back to I don't know how Auburn scores more than 17 points in the best case scenario.
You're starting a true freshman at quarterback
Yeah.
that doesn't really throw the ball, and you got a defense that's really starting to play pretty well now and is healthy and coming into its own. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough for Auburn to move the ball on this.
How do you think this worked? Do you think this whole sitting down thing was like
It's better lighting,
Yeah.
and the camera's not pointed up at us. So
And my back's
it's
feeling
probably-
better. I think when I work, I feel.
And we can watch the coaches go out to practice as we go here.
We've only seen Rick. I guess Grantham and Bobo are taking the night off. No, that's not true. All right, see you guys next week.